they would gather bread to them, and they would do a meal together. So these households, they're like a real thing in the life of the ancient community, an important part of shared collective life. And Paul takes this social institution and uses it as a metaphor for this community God is forming. Telling us that because of the story of God, the mission of belonging in the world, you are being formed into a household of God. And I think this is interesting because there's so many metaphors in Scripture that they could have used to describe the community. And often do. Family, citizens, members of the one body. But Paul here uses this language, household, to describe the outcome of God's story. And I think that there is a couple reasons for this that are really important for us. And I think the first reason Paul uses this metaphor is because households can include family, but they extend beyond it. In the ancient world, these little homes would include your family, but they would include more people than just your family. And I think that the church takes this metaphor on. It speaks to family, but also an extension beyond that. And here's what I mean. Tori, my wife, is a part of both my household and my family. This places of care. This places of care. When we talk about the story of belonging and participate in visions and overwhelming, everyday tangible care, where rhythms actually merged, where humans actually had to interact with one another. One writer about households describes it really beautifully, saying this: a household is both a place and a people. Or better, it is a particular people with a particular place, like Salt Lake City. A household is a community of persons who may well take shelter under one roof, but also, and more fundamentally, take shelter under one another's care and concern. Households are places where rhythms and resources and responsibilities are shared, where people learn to depend upon one another, trust one another, and even have conflict with one another. It's the kind of environment, the kind of community in which people live close enough to be seen and to see, to press beyond the normal and into the vulnerable. I think Paul intends this to be a part of our imagination when we think about what the kind of community God is forming is. One that is here, one that is close, one that is uncomfortable. And honestly, I love this picture of community, but it is awkward too. And it does make me feel that is places where we practice our for God's community are intended to help us understand that they are going to be messy in the way that families and households are messy. Because they are the places of belonging. And like dinner that grows up and that develops and that heals. But it is the only way we learn is by doing. So these communities become the place in which we learn to belong. There's a scholar of these ancient household churches named Alan Kreider who writes about what happened in these early homes and household churches, and I think it's really beautiful. He says this: the early Christians did not have church buildings. They met in households. And these were the centers of instruction, in patience, in prayer, in the renunciation of violence, and the practice of hospitality. The household of believers became the setting in which people could see with their own eyes how Christ reshaped daily life. Households are intended to be schools of formation, centers of learning, dojos of belonging, safe places where we get to risk and to grow and to fail, places to develop the skills of the Jesus way. I think that's why Paul is using this language here. Because he wants believers in the church to behave this way and to practice community in this way. because he wants believers in the church to behave this way and to practice community in this way. And the powers, his wisdom through the church. When we practice forgiveness, when we restore, when we do the hard work of learning how to belong to Christ despite our differences, or maybe when we open our lives to one another and to the other, we speak God's wisdom to the powers that be. We show another way. We demonstrate that something else is possible. Missio, this is the invitation we are invited into by Jesus. To become a household of faith, a dojo of belonging, a school of formation in which we are able together to learn our shared belonging and tell a different story about the world. And it will not be easy. Community is not easy. Belonging to one another is not easy, and honestly, that's why it tells a good story when we try. But the invitation is before us. To be centered on Christ, empowered by his Spirit to make known a different world. And it reminds me, as I was prepping this sermon, of the words of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who during the Montgomery bus boycott gave a speech. And he said something that has always kind of haunted me. And he speaks to the church and he says this: we have before us a glorious opportunity